finding your audience, and you'll see that I used all capital letters, so your, and I did that because, well, frankly, I want your audience. Your audience could be different than someone else's audience, and as luck would have it, your audience will vary from situation to situation. So it could be that you find your audience for one paper or one project, and then you have to find a different audience for the next one. But what I'm going to do over the next little while is give you some tips and tricks about that. My name is Bob Graham, and I'm a lecturer at the Center of Leadership Education, which is part of the Whiting School of Engineering. And the Center for Leadership Education is where most of the courses are involved with more experiential opportunities. So we do a lot of real world situations in our classes, and my background, just to give you a little bit of that, because I think it really colors what I'm about to say, my background is actually, I studied in college to be a journalist, and my dream in life when I was in high school, college, even right out of college, was to be the executive editor at the New York Times or the Washington Post or my hometown paper, the Baltimore Sun. But as you may have noticed in the last 10, 15 years, newspapers have kind of changed a bit. And I found that there weren't as many jobs in newspapers as I'd hoped there would be. So I ended up shifting into a marketing career, and I've done tech editing and freelance writing, and basically any kind of writing that I could do, or communications. I actually wrote speeches at one point for the governor of Maryland and some senators in Maryland and some other folks. I've had quite a broad brush of career opportunities, and I think where that's going to really pay off tonight is I am not a teacher. I am more looking at this from the perspective of a writer, because that's how I look at things. So I think what you're going to see today are some different different perspectives on how to go about finding your audience and also writing. And I'm trying to get my screen to advance. There it goes. And so let me sort of walk through the agenda real quick for you. We're going to talk about the role of audience in communication. Of course, if we're talking about finding your audience, we need to talk about the audience. How to find your audience, identifying it, shaping your argument around that audience, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks. And I can tell you, these are not the types of tricks that you're used to seeing and hearing from a college instructor. And if there are any college instructors listening in, I apologize if you think that I'm saying something negative about you. But I just want to present this in a way that's more based on a writer and a reader and less on the typical college instruction. So I'm really hoping, I put it in big bold letters, and this is my challenge to myself. I want to make better, easier writing and communication for you from what I talk about tonight. So that's where we go from here. And then here's what this won't be. And I think it's really important to talk about what this won't be. This is not going to be boring. And I think you're probably already getting a feel for that in the first 3 minutes. It's also not going to be another teacher telling you the same stuff you've ever heard. I'm not going to do any grammar unless someone asks me to do grammar, because I don't think that's going to help right now tonight. I want to sort of look at things a little more broadly. And then it's not going to be like the lectures you've sat through 100 times. First of all, it's online, so I've already got that working for me. And second, I'm not really a straight lecture type person, so this will be a little different. And again, if you want to ask me a question, feel free to find the chat function and type in your question. And I will work them into my discussion as we go. Someone is asking me, how do we get the audio to come up? There should be a volume switch. And Heather, if you can jump in and sort of help us with that question about how do we get audio to come up, you might be more of the expert. Heather Snyder is sort of my tech guru tonight. So if she jumps in, she may be able to give us an answer. And I forgot to turn off my phone, and you just heard it click. I apologize for that. Again, you can ask questions as we go. And I'm going to keep rolling. And again, like I said, I'm going to provide you tips and tricks from a writer, not from a teacher, not from a college professor, but truly from a writer. So that's what you can look forward to and what you can see that we won't be doing. So let's get to it, okay? So we're going to play a little game here, and feel free to write in the chat box your answer to this question. How would you explain what a college professor is to triplets who are age 5? And these are 3 5-year-old triplets that live next door to me. And they call me Bob, and they think that I'm the funniest guy in the world. Um, they they asked me the other day, "What do you do?" And I had to explain to them that I was a college professor. And how do you think I explained that to them? So if you want to write in the chat what your answer would be to that, go ahead. I'll give you a second to think about it. I'll try not to talk. And if you're curious, on the far left is Lou, his brother Frank's in the middle, and then Rose is on the right. Oh, someone gave me the answer, a teacher for adults. Okay, a teacher for children. Thank you. Any other possibilities you can think of? Okay, so what I actually told them was that I know that they go to preschool, and I asked them if they had a teacher, and they said yes. And I said, what does the teacher do? And they said the teacher tells them what to do and tells them what letter of the week it is. Each week they have a different letter. And I said, well, I kind of do the same stuff at a college, but my students are older and they don't want me to tell them what to do. They want me to tell them how to be better at doing things they already know how to do. So they already know their letters. So that's how I handled it with triplets. And now let's try it a different one. The girl, those of you, if you ever meet my wife, don't tell her she was in a picture. She does not know she's in the picture. She's the one wearing the Oreo cap, my lovely wife, Laura. We've been married for 28 years. The little boy in the middle is Zachary, one of my nephews, and my niece, Sophia, is age 10. And I had the same discussion with her about a year ago. Hey, what do you do, Uncle Bob? And you may wonder why they're fit. So what do you think I told a 10-year-old compared to a 5-year-old? And I will tell you, Sophia's 10 going on about 18. She's really, really sharp. Sophia, they were dressed, we took them to a balloon ascension, and they had face painting. So they got their face painted. I did not, but this is one of the pictures when they were showing everyone their face painting. So if you take a second, what would you say to a 10-year-old to help them understand what a college professor is? Mark tells me he'd tell them the same thing. Interesting. Ed says that the most basic function is teaching. On a higher level, you inspire people to enjoy what they enjoy. Wow. Ed, I like that. Let me say that again. That's really cool. On a higher level, you inspire people to enjoy what they enjoy. I will tell you, Ed, that that's something that I'm going to take away from this evening. That I've never thought about what I do that way, and that really makes me think about it, and really makes me feel good about what I do. If I actually do help people become inspired in what they want to achieve. So we've got 2, and then you probably see that there's a spot over on the right. We're going to try a third one. This is another niece of mine. I have 21 nieces and nephews. No children of my own, but 21 nieces and nephews. This is my niece, Erin. And Erin puts me through my paces. She likes to harass me, and she likes to ask me really hard questions. So she's looking at colleges, and I went on a college visit with her. We went up to Philadelphia from Baltimore and looked at 2 schools. We looked at St. Joe's and LaSalle together. And she asked me what my job as a college professor is in a college setting. So what do you think I told her? And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not what I told my niece age 10 and the triplets age 5. So what do you think I told Erin, who's about to go to college? I'll give you a second to think about that. I'll try not to talk for 10 seconds. That'll be a record for me. So my answer to Erin was, I'm basically like a high school teacher, except I demand more of you to do the work and more of you to figure out what you want to do. And I don't do as much motivating as a high school teacher does. And I know that because I taught high school at one point. So Oh, there's a great answer. I got a career coach. That's an interesting perspective for a college professor. I like that idea. Um, and my niece could certainly use a career coach at this point because she has no idea what she wants to do. So as you can see here, different audience. So I gave you 3 easy examples. Different audience, different answers, or sometimes the same answer. So that's where we talk about audience. So if I go forward, why the difference? Of course, because each of them understands the world a little bit differently. A 5-year-old does not have the experience that a 17-year-old has. And a 10-year-old and a 17-year-old have different experiences. So when you think about audience, you have to think about how each looks at the world. I have another answer that just came in. You help people through their journey to acquiring new skills leading to employment. Yes, I like that, Ed. That's another good one. You help people through their journey to acquiring new skills leading to employment. I like that. That makes me sound like I do really good work. I like that. Um, the other thing is, I want, in all the cases, if someone asks me a question, I want to be able to give them an answer where they understand. And the key word in this line is, we need to be understood by all of them. If I'm talking to a person, if I'm talking to you in this presentation, I've got to find a way to present this information so that you understand and appreciate it. If I don't, that's a failure on my part. And I take that responsibility very seriously. I was working on this presentation over the last week or two, and I spent a lot of time on it because I wanted to make sure that I had some things that were interesting, some things that were fun, and some things that made you think. So the last thing is, of course, you have to tailor your comments to your audience. That goes without saying. And that's one of the things I can say that I sometimes see my students forget. My students often, I deal with a lot of engineering students here at the Homewood campus at Hopkins, and a lot of my students tend to write in a very technical way things that I, as a non-technical person, do not understand. And so they have to explain it to me. And I explain to them that you have to make sure that if you're writing something to your audience, they need to be able to understand it. And they go, well, everyone knows this. And I say, no, everyone doesn't know that. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I don't know all the things that my students know, much like they don't know all the things I know. So when you think about about what you say or what you write, you want to make sure it's tailored to your audience, which of course leads you to the question of, how do I learn about my audience? And we'll talk about that a little more in a couple minutes. So we're going to do another little activity here. I study soft skills. That's the area of research I do. And if you're curious about what soft skills are, I'm about to show you. I'm going to give you 2 examples of my description of soft skills. And I want you to write in, if you would, in the chat, who the audience for each one is. So the first one is this one. And I'll give you a second to read it. Actually, I think I'm going to read it out loud because I hate being quiet because I'll get bored. So let me read it. Technical skills are necessary, discipline-specific knowledge, cognitive ability, proficiency, and experience. But the growing demands being put on workers is necessitating a wider array of skills to succeed in the workplace. This additional set of skills is often described collectively as non-technical skills. These skills, including communication, leadership and teamwork, presentation, project management, and adapting to change, are not easily taught in the traditional classroom setting. So, what do you think? I've got, Seth says it sounds like an intro to a textbook. That hurt, Seth. That really hurt. But I agree with you. So would you say that this is for a technical audience? Is this for an audience that probably understands technical skills? What do you think? If you think it's for a technical audience, put a Y for yes. And there you go. I got a couple of yeses. Any more? Anyone object to that? Anyone disagree? Okay. I've got yeses. I've got 3, 4, 5 yeses. Oh, there we go. Ed says the use of technical jargon implies a knowledge in the area. Yes, yes. I hate that you use the word jargon, Ed. As the writer of this, that hurt deeply. But yes, I would confess that within the world of people who would read this, this definitely is jargony, and this is actually written for a journal article. This was published in a journal article for folks that do for a publication called Decision Sciences Institute. So it's people that know, that teach, that are interested in this area of expertise. Ed says he's sorry. Ed, I'm not offended. You're going to have to work harder to offend me. But someone says that it was translated into accessible language for anyone. And I'd like to think so. Now let me give you another example. This is something else I wrote. And tell me what this audience is for, or what this is written to, which audience, or what kind of audience. So to understand soft skills, you have to understand what technical skills are. The best definition of technical skills is aptitudes, processes, and skills necessary to deliver product or service. The pilot of an airplane has to understand aerodynamics, flying instruments and controls, and the Federal Aviation Administration's system for handling flights to successfully take off, fly to a destination, and land the aircraft. Those skills are all technical. However, a host of other skills are required to fly effectively. If the pilot works for a big airline, in order to succeed, he has to deal with an even greater array of issues unrelated to the actual flying of the airplane. He's the leader of the airplane. As a leader, he needs to work effectively with co-pilot, navigator, empowering them to feel valuable in doing their jobs to ensure that they perform at peak levels at all times during the flight. These are the soft skills. So I've got managers, general audience. This looks like a description for a high school senior or a college freshman as an intro to the area. I like that. Any other thoughts? Would you say that this is less technical or more technical than the first one? If it's less technical, put an L. If it's more technical, put an M. I've got L's, all L's. I've got one M, 4 L's. So this was written, so you know, I'm actually writing a book with my research partner, and this is part of the beginning of the book, the introduction to the book. So this book we're hoping to sell to business leaders and human resources professionals who may not be very familiar with the idea of soft skills. So you can see one of the big differences in dealing with these two different audiences is with the first one, I made some assumptions. I assumed that they kind of had a feel for what this was. So I didn't give them the airplane pilot analogy or description through that filter. But with an audience that may not know the technical aspects, I felt like I had to explain to them some of the key parts, the differences. And it occurred to me when I was working on this when I was flying a couple of months ago. And it just hit me that the pilot is the perfect filter to give both sides of this. So you can see I've shifted this very similar content. I mean, the whole goal of both these pieces is to tell people what soft skills are. But in the case of the second one, I'm going much more descriptive and much more concrete so that someone can see and feel it because they may not know it. This is probably new information to about 90% of that audience. So you can see the difference. And so it's all about the audience. And of course, you probably know these two people. It's Taylor Swift. Haters gonna hate, 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 hate. I'm gonna just shake, shake, shake it off, shake it off. There you go. Didn't think you were gonna get Taylor Swift. And then the other guy is Drake. I apologize. I cannot, Mark just says, stop that, please, jokingly. Mark, come on. I'm trying to give you some fun here. I don't know Drake's son. I will confess, I asked my niece, Erin, for a male artist that would be trendy, that my students would be way excited about. And she's like, you got to go with Drake, Uncle Bob. So I know Taylor Swift. I like Taylor Swift. I saw Drake on Saturday Night Live. But what I'm trying to get across here is these two are able to get their message across. Taylor Swift sings a lot about broken relationships and about what it's like to be a girl or a woman in this era. Through her music, she's conveying a message, and she's getting her message across through her music, and she's working with her audience. Now, these two people have great audiences, and of course, if you don't have an audience, you're nothing. And to give you an example of that, there's me this afternoon playing the guitar. And you can see my computer right next to me, and I'm actually working on the presentation, but I took a little break to play guitar. You can see I'm not happy that I got caught playing guitar. It's all about the audience, but of course, if you don't have an audience, you're playing for yourself. And that's how my guitar playing is, because I don't have an audience. And frankly, you wouldn't want to hear my guitar playing. I was going to give you a little clip of it, but I chose not to for fear of embarrassment. So you can thank me later. Lose the glasses. If I lose the glasses, I will not be able to see what I'm reading. I won't be able to see the screen, but thank you for that suggestion. I do lose the glasses, but the reading glasses. Um, so thank you for that. I appreciate that you're paying so close the attention. And anybody know what chord I'm playing there? Oh, hey, I'm sorry. I did not realize that. Thank me later. That's a Drake song. Okay, thank you. I'm learning a lot. Um, so if you look here, anybody know what D chord? Very good. We've got some guitarists in the house. Mark, a Jay Hanley, and a Joseph know their D chords. Very nice. I'm quite impressed. So I told you it wasn't going to be boring. We've got Taylor Swift. Oh, and then someone says, unless you're using a weird tuning. Wow, I need to take guitar lessons from you. You're hardcore. I'm just getting my chords down. I can do the chords. I'm working on bar chords, but no weird tunings yet. Someday, maybe. So at the risk of deviating completely from the topic at hand, let me keep going. So when we talk about the audience and the reality, whether you're writing or speaking, I'm talking mostly today about writing. It is too hard to waste time on it if no one will care. If I do this presentation and you aren't paying attention and I'm not getting through, I'm not giving you valuable information, I'm wasting my time and I'm wasting your time. And that's not valuable for either of us. That doesn't help anyone. And you've all been to classes, I'm sure. You've been to presentations where it's a waste of time. And so the challenge of someone writing or someone speaking is to make it valuable. And if you're the person writing or speaking, you've got to make it valuable to your audience. So you can see some of the ways I'm making it valuable is I'm trying not to make it just be straight lecture. I've mixed it up with some personal experience with my nieces and the triplets and my guitar playing. And I've also tried to make it fun. So you can see that I'm really trying to work with an audience. Most of you watching this live, it's after 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, and you have plenty of things you could be doing now. So I know that there are things I could be doing now. And I'm here and you're here, and I don't want you to feel like you wasted your time, and I don't want to waste my time. So next, I want to take a second. I'm contractually obligated, because this is how it works in life. I've got to explain to you some of the science. And you may have never seen this, or you may have seen this before. This is the science of communication and what we need to do. And there's the Latin terms ethos, pathos, and logos. And you can use the easier terms, credibility, emotion, and logic. And if you're going to communicate, you have to have credibility. In other words, you have to be trustworthy. So you have to trust that I know what I'm talking about right now. If you don't know what if I don't know what I'm talking about, like when I start talking about Drake, you can see my credibility could go down, right? That's actually why I did that. I wanted to give you an example of a lack of credibility. I don't know Drake, but when I talked about Taylor Swift, I knew her lyrics, I knew her song, I know Blank Space, I know Style, I know the Romeo and Juliet song, and you could say, wow, you know your Taylor Swift pretty well. I'm not going to sing anymore, so you're okay. So you've got to build credibility. How do we build credibility when we're dealing with writing? It's by using references, analogies, things that our audience can understand and appreciate. So you can see how I've done that in this presentation. If we go down to the lower left, you can see pathos or emotion. Of course, there's got to be some stories. You can see I brought stories into this in a number of places, because if I just give you the straight facts, this is going to be really boring and you're not going to remember it. And I can tell you, one of the things I've found in my teaching, a lot of my students come back and see me a year or 2 or 3 years later, and they always say the same thing. I remember that time you told that story about. And that reminds me how important story is and what we're talking about. And when we talk about story, we're not talking about fictional stories like Romeo and Juliet or Frozen. Let it go, let it go. See? Oh, I did sing again. Sorry about that, guys. We're not talking about fictional stories. We're talking about story in the sense that there's a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear ending. And the best way I can describe that for you is you know what you're writing and why things are where they are, and you've got a logic to how you're writing it. And the stories, the anecdotes fit what you're writing. So if you think about that pilot analogy I used, or that description I used through the pilot, you can see that I really thought that through and it really fits what I was doing. And if I use something else, it might not have worked that well. And in using a really good story, a really good analogy or metaphor, you get some emotion into it. You also build up your credibility at the same time. And then the third one is logic. You've got to have some logic to what you do. So facts, figures, case studies, the research that you do that gives you the credibility. So you know, there's some logic here. The people who have invited me to give this presentation are probably really happy that I'm talking about the science here rather than just Taylor Swift lyrics. But the logic, the reasoning for your argument, how you put your argument together, how you package it so that it goes from A to B to C to D in a fashion that the reader or the listener can follow is really critical. So when you think about dealing with your audience, once you know who your audience is, you can bring some emotional elements to it. You can have credibility and you can have logic. And we'll talk more about this as we go forward. But that ends our Latin part, ethos, pathos, and logos. So you don't have to memorize the Latin. But if you want to impress someone, especially you folks who want to go into technical writing, they're good words to have in your vocabulary when the right time comes up. So as we go forward, the biggest question, of course, is how do we identify our audience? And that's why we're here tonight. So let me sort of walk through that with you. So first of all, you've got to ask some questions. And I'm going to use an example here of this presentation as just an example because you're paying attention to the presentation, hopefully, and you know what it is. And I'm going to let you sort of behind the wall of how I put this together so you can see what I did to address these things I'm about to add, these questions that we should ask whenever we're doing any kind of writing. First of all, what constraints do I have? If you're writing a paper, one of the first questions is, how many words do I have? Or how many pages can I go? How many resources do I have to include? When I wrote a journal article that was limited to 5,000 words. That was different than the journal article I wrote to the same audience that was 10,000 words. And that's really different than the book I'm writing, which we can write 200 pages. So when you know the limitations that you have, you can address them. So for instance, I have some constraints tonight. I have 1 hour to cover a really big topic. I could talk about this topic for about 4 days if I needed to. But one of the other limitations is that I can't see you all. And you can see me, but I can't see you. And that creates some constraints. And that's why you can see I'm trying to do some things to just sort of make us interact. So if this is making sense so far, give me a Y in the chat room feature. And again, if you joined us in the last little while, feel free to put some questions in that chat room. Or if I'm confusing you, or if you want to give me an example, feel free. Can anyone think of any other constraints that typically come up when you're writing? Any other constraints that you have typically when you're writing something? Time you have to prepare. Yes, that is the number one. And then someone else said lack of information, and then a variety of experiences with the topic amongst the audience. There you have the big three. The biggest constraint, though, I would tell you is time. If I have 1 hour to prepare a presentation, it's probably not going to be as good as if I have 3 or 5 weeks. Lack of information, of course, if there isn't anything to say or if you don't know enough about the topic, that's going to create problems. Having an audience that has varied experience is really tricky. One thing I would tell you is if you have an audience that has varied experience, steer towards the low end, not the high end. So you don't want people to get lost. Better to go into shallower water and get everyone in shallow water than go into deep water with people who can't swim, to use a metaphor. So really get with variety of experience, try to figure out what if it's on a scale 1 to 10, their experience level, I would shoot for a 1 or 2. The people who know stuff, as long as you get it right, will not be that offended. But if the people at the low end of knowledge on the topic, you're talking to them and they have no idea what you're talking about, it's not going to go really well. And then another one that comes up more and more these days, limitation of language, bilingual students or bilingual audience. I teach at the Homewood campus, and we have a lot of students from different countries, and sometimes the students from different countries don't understand when I'm telling a joke in class, and they'll come up after class and ask me what my joke. I didn't understand that, and I realized that the joke that I thought made perfect sense, because I've lived in American culture all my life, did not make sense to them, and they thought it was something very serious. So yes, language can be a limitation, a barrier as well, but something to overcome. And of course, if you're writing something and you know that your audience has some limitations with language, you want to use words that are not super complex, right? You want to simplify things, much like writing for a 5-year-old as opposed to a college student, right? And so that goes back to our example earlier. So I'm going to keep going. Another question that we want to ask is, who will find and read what you're writing? And that's a really important question. Who is going to read it? So if you're writing this for your instructor, that's a little different than if you're writing this for your classmates, or if you're writing it for the dean, or, sorry about that, if you're writing it for a general audience, knowing who that audience is or who will find it and how they'll find it. So for instance, with this presentation, I knew that this was going to be for students who want to become better writers, those who need to write better, and students were encouraged to participate in this. So I knew that going into it. So I know the people that are going to be listening to this are interested in the topic, because if you're not interested in this topic, why would you be here right now, right? Don't all leave at once. Stay, please stay. So yeah, knowing your audience in the sense, and again, sometimes you have to guess. I want to be really clear. This is not a guarantee that you're going to know your audience. I had a sense of my audience for this presentation, but I've actually learned a lot about my audience just by the way you've answered questions. And that is helping me to do a better job as I go. So it's great when you do a presentation because you can learn about your audience as you go. But when you're writing something, you don't have that luxury. So another question you want to ask is, why should your audience care? Now, I know, because I'm a writer, that I believe that everything I write, everyone should read, and everyone should pay full attention. So I actually believe that the people participating tonight, none of you are watching the Capitals hockey game. None of you are listening to the radio. None of you have anything else going on in your life right now. You are totally focused on every word I say, right? Give me a Y if that's true. Go ahead. I'm waiting for that to be a big N. Oh, I got a Y. Okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you. Excellent, Seth. I got a Z. That's a new one. I don't know what a Z does. Great. So I do have a lot of Ys. That's great. Then I'm doing my job really well. And hopefully I'm delivering on what I promised. Oh, Mary tells me that she has a tot on her lap to boot. Wow. Well, hi to the little one. How are you? It's probably going to be bedtime. Mary will be free soon to put you to bed. She can read you a story, I bet, if you're really good. So why should your audience, oh, and I've got that Mary says her kids love Taylor Swift. Well, maybe they got to hear me sing. Oh, it's a 6-year-old, even better. Mary's trying to get me to sing some more, but I don't think it's going to happen. So why should your audience care? And here's why you should care tonight. I can help you improve your grades, and I help you prepare for your career, because more and more people need these skills. That's why the university is making this available to you, and hopefully that's what you're hoping to get out of this. And Mark says it's really good that I'm not singing more Taylor Swift. Um, Another question to ask: what do they already know about the topic? I assumed for this evening's purposes that I didn't have to explain, I didn't have to define audience. I have not defined audience because I think you know what audience is. I also did not have to define what a paper is and what a presentation is, because I know my audience already knows that. You've all written before, so I didn't have to go into how this relates so closely to the writing. That's a calculation on my part. So you can see, I know what you are, I have a good sense of what you already know. And you can often ask people. One of the things I do with my writing is I ask people, hey, what do you know about this topic? Before I write something. With the book I'm doing about soft skills, we actually talked to a couple of HR people, human resources people, and asked them what they knew about the topic, and most of them said, we know next to nothing. We'd love to learn more. Tell me anything. So as you can see, the book with the small section you saw is trying to appeal to that audience based on that feedback. One of the other questions to ask, what don't they know about the topic? And more importantly, what do they need to know to make their lives better? So I'm hoping by helping going through these questions in this process tonight that I'm going to make it easier for you to find your audience when you're putting together some sort of writing assignment or a presentation. So you can see tricks. And I'm trying to sort of connect things you may have heard before in different ways. Someone asked me a question, really great question. Can you contrast academic versus professional audiences in terms of writing? Well, that's a great question, and I actually live in both worlds a lot each day. One of the things I find with an academic audience is you have to be perfect with your grammar and your spelling and punctuation, and sentences matter. When I work with a professional audience, writing for a professional audience, all those things matter, but I have a little more freedom to be a little looser, so I can sometimes break up the monotony of the normal writing. And I'll give you an example. I was writing something for a client of mine the other day, and I wrote about 5 paragraphs. The second paragraph was 4 words, and it was, the first paragraph was an introduction, and the second paragraph was literally just boom, right in your face like that. 4 simple words that completely pivoted everything that the audience would know about. And this was for a website. I don't know how easy it would be to write a 4-word paragraph in a paper for an academic audience. I think you could try it, but I think someone would say, hey, does that go with the last paragraph or the next paragraph? You can't have a 4-word paragraph. Don't tell anyone, but you actually can. But the academic audience tends to be a much more technical and much more focused on the other thing I would say about the academic audience is your academic audience is going to want much more concrete proof, and they want citations that are complete. Whereas with a non-academic audience, with a professional audience, I can say to my clients all the time, research shows. They don't ask me what the research is. They don't want me to cite the research. They just want to know there's research out there. That's my job. If I'm writing an academic paper, I've got to make sure I have full citations, and they've got to follow whatever style requirements are imposed by whoever that writing instructor would be. Hopefully that gives you a little feel for that. That's a great question. Thank you. And then next, another one. What approach can you use to make the information sticky and appealing? Now, I use the word sticky, and I love the word sticky because if you think of sticky, sticky is something that you can't get off your hands. I ate a sticky bun the other day, and there were no napkins where I was, and I had to wipe my hands. I ended up licking my fingers because they were so sticky. And that's what we want. When you do really good writing or really good presentation, it becomes sticky, meaning something sticks with your audience. And I'm hoping something that I tell you tonight, something you read on one of these slides, is sticky enough that you're going to remember it tomorrow, maybe 2 weeks from now, maybe 2 years from now. Maybe you'll even tell it to your kids when they get to write a paper in high school or college. Oh, Mark's asking me the big question. Does the question mark go inside the quote? Great question, Mark. You've hit on one of the sticky issues in academic writing. So I will answer why I used the why I put the quotation mark inside the question mark. In this case, Mark says, sorry, it's an academic question. No, it's an academic audience. I totally get it. The reason I put it there is because sticky is one word, and that's the only thing, and I wanted to focus solely on that word. If I put the quotation, or if I put the question mark inside sticky, it would change the whole sentence. So if you think of that sentence ending on appealing, I would have put the question mark to the right of the G in appealing. So because I used sticky, I did the same thing. Now I could have cheated, and here's the other way I can prove that I did it correctly. If I turn the sentence around and put sticky and then appealing, so if I wrote what approach can make the information sticky and appealing, I would have gotten around my whole problem. And that's one of the tricks I will tell you as a writer. And as I look at it right now, I wish I had thought to do that, to work around it. When you have a problem, you can often switch it. I'm getting some questions. Mark says that will stick for life. Oh, that's funny. Someone else says sticky and single quotes, and yeah, I could have used single quotes as well. Maybe not. I try to avoid single quotes unless they're inside double quotes because I think it gets confusing to the reader. So great questions. I love that you're paying such close attention. So here we go. In terms of this presentation, I wanted to be more conversational, so I showed pictures of my family. I mixed up the orders. I made pop references. So I tried to make it appealing, and I tried to make this sticky. And I'm hoping that, you know, maybe one of you hears a Taylor Swift song in a month or a year or 5 years and goes, oh, that reminds me of audience and how I need to keep an audience in whatever I write or whatever I do so that I understand my audience. And if that works, then I've done my job really well tonight. So this is a whole bunch of puzzle pieces. I totally get it. There's no question. And so now I want to try to help you figure out how to shape things for your audience. So we've asked some questions about how do we get to figuring out who and what our audience is, and now what do we do with that? So shaping the argument, first and foremost, and my students in my classes hear this all the time from me. It's all about them. It's not about you, the writer. It's about the audience. So what works really well for you, the writer, may not work for your audience. You know, what works for me in terms of telling jokes may not work for someone else, and maybe some of you are going, boy, I wish he'd just stop telling jokes and move on and quit talking about Taylor Swift. That you got to know what's right for your audience. So here, notice I did not go into a lot of theory. We had one slide where I talked about the science, and I'm trying to create easy to follow, easy action items. I'm not getting super technical. I'm not getting super teachery because I don't think that's going to help you right now. And that's not what I would want at this point in the day. So I'm trying to really reflect in this presentation what I think is what you are looking for, not what I am trying, not what I would do if I were giving this presentation for me, but what I would do if I was giving it to you. So of course, if I know who my audience is, then that's much easier. And then second, repeat number one. Yes, it really is about the audience. It's about them really. And I repeat that there. See, there's another little thing that I do so it sticks in your head. You know, I got a list of things and I repeated number one because I wanted to really stick. That's not something I would probably do if I were in a class here at Johns Hopkins in the classroom. I would just go from 1 to 2, but I wanted to be a little funny and I wanted to really emphasize the point in a way that I can't do it. If I were in the classroom, I would go, it really is all about them. But that doesn't work so well here. So this was my way to get around that. And again, it's me realizing my audience and the constraints and working within that audience and the constraints. So the next one is brainstorm ideas. So in terms of brainstorming, the best way to go about brainstorming is to just be completely open. Take some time and just throw any possibility for how you could write something or present it onto a sheet of paper. So for instance, with this one, I wanted to be funny and interesting, and I just gotten that picture of the triplets, and I wanted to use it because I thought it might be fun. And when my wife saw that picture, she immediately laughed, and she thought it was a cute picture, and I thought, boy, that'd be really fun. You know, I'd start with something fun and then work into a little more seriousness. So actually, this is my scribbled notes from about 3.5 weeks ago of what I was going to cover in my presentation. And if you can't read my scribble, and again, these are bullets just for me. When I wrote it, I did not anticipate that I would actually use it. So it's in my it's in my writing. First one says different audiences. Second one says it's all about them. Don't use what won't work. You might see that coming up. Brainstorm possibilities and know your audience. Those were the 5 key points I was going to cover. So you can see I'm true to that. I've expanded on that, but that is the foundation of this presentation. And some of that came from talking to the people that engaged me to do this. What were they looking for? I had separate notes from a discussion I had with them. It's probably been, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, maybe even 4 months ago. And I had those notes of what they were looking for and what they thought of who the audience was. And I integrated that into this, and this really became the foundation of my presentation. So one of the things I would tell you is, oh yeah, so someone's saying to me, interesting structure for this presentation. The presentation itself is a takeaway example applied to the concept you're conveying. Good strategy. Hey, you're onto something. Yes, I'm totally using this to show all these points because I thought it might stick. So great that you figured that out. So one of the things I will tell you, here is a writer's tip that I really believe in. Truly, write bullets before sentences. If you're writing a paper, write 1,000,000 bullets and rearrange them and shift them and sort them and cross them out and move them around and change the words. It's so much easier to write bullets than sentences, because once you write sentences, you're going to fall in love with sentences. And sentences are closer to a finished product than bullets. You can see if you look at these bullets, my presentation has come a long way from those bullets. And that's the creativity. If I had created these 5 slides, it would have been really hard for me to go back and rebuild this. I wouldn't have gotten the triplets into it because the triplets didn't come to me until a couple of days ago. The image of them was a couple of days ago. Actually using this list you see here didn't come to me until last night. And I was like, oh, I need another visual element. What can I use? Hey, I got this list. I was going through making sure I covered all the points. I'm like, hey, I should take a picture of that and put it in. So I would really recommend not writing your first draft as sentences, but bullets. Just literally a list of bullets of what you're trying to cover. If phrases come to you, if ideas come to you, do it in bullets. You can do them numbered. You can do an outline. I like bullets. I don't know why. And you can see I moved these around, but bullets are really your friend. And if you're someone who believes in writer's block, I got to tell you, I don't buy writer's block. I believe that writer's block is really, in fact, I might do a presentation on this for you guys someday. I really think that writer's block is just you haven't done enough pre-writing. You don't know what you want. You don't know what you want to say yet, so you can't say it. And I find when I write a list like this, put bullets down, it gets me into the mindset, into the frame of mind of what I need to do to start writing sentences. And by the time I start writing sentences, I usually have a pretty good idea of what I'm trying to say. When I put this presentation together about 2 weeks ago, I had about 75% of what I wanted to say really clear in my head. Someone's asking me what writer's block is. I'm sorry, I should describe that. So writer's block is a phrase that we often use to describe a writer who sits in front of a screen and can't write anything. And the old saying is, oh, I got writer's block, I can't write. I don't know what to write. So they're sitting in front of a blank screen, they don't know what to type, and we often say that we have writer's block. And there are various people that will give you all kinds of tips for how to overcome writer's block. One of my students a couple years ago told me that he drinks 2 or 3 beers and then he's able to write. I don't advocate that. I do not agree with that philosophy. That doesn't make sense. I've heard a number of times from students that the way to get over writer's block is to have a deadline. So I really can't write until like 3 hours before the paper's due. I just don't buy it. I do not believe in writer's block. I believe that writer's block is just an excuse for not knowing what you want to say. Someone's asking me, how do you deal with procrastination? I'm going to put that answer off. I know that sounds like a joke. You can see the joke putting off the answer to procrastination. I will get to that. I'm going to keep going on my list, and then I'll take that question and other ones. And if you have other questions for me, please shoot them to me. So just going through this real quick, don't fall in love with what doesn't work. So I actually really had the idea of playing a song on guitar. And I was in love with the idea, and I was getting my wife to record it for me, and she said, this is really stupid. I hate this idea. I don't even want to record this for you. You need to get rid of this. It's not going to help you. And I thought about it, and I was kind of embarrassed by that. And then I was like, you know what? You're right. The other thing, I was going to make this more formal. Very similar to what I do in my classes, but I didn't think it would work online. So I loosened it up. Someone says, good wife. I'll tell her you said that. She'll be very happy. So I changed things up. So this is, again, me understanding my audience. So I was in love with the idea that was fun for me, but it wasn't going to be useful for my audience. So that's really the key to making sure that your argument, your whatever you're going to write is useful to your audience. So one or two more. Start writing sentences and paragraphs after you have your ideas really clear in your head and or on paper. Then you start writing paragraphs. And I will tell you, see what happens when you start writing. Sometimes there's magic that comes from writing. Someone's telling me my wife should hide the guitar. Oh, she would love to, if only. She's got it now. I don't even play it when she's around. That's how bad I am. Sometimes magic occurs when you write. If you know what you're trying to say, if you have the ideas in your head, sometimes the muse, the magic, whatever you want to call it, shows up in words. And I can tell you countless times in my life where I've written something that I had no idea where that idea came from. It wasn't in my head. And it's like the keyboard just took itself over and great things happened. And I really believe that that happens a lot if you present the opportunity for that to happen. So there are two more ways to shape the argument. And then in revision, make sure you go back and compare what you've created to what your audience's needs are. So that was where I went back to my list and said, hey, did I do what they asked me to do? And I went back to my original notes from the first discussions about this presentation. Am I delivering on what I said I would do? Am I doing it in a way that that would be useful? So again, it's about knowing your audience and making sure that you come back to it and deliver it to them in a way that they can access and that they're engaged in. So you can see here, I had to find the second musician. It says 26-year-old. I actually asked her and she didn't know. I ended up asking my 16-year-old niece, who said Drake. Again, finding the right information, and it can go right up to the last minute on the presentation or on the writing. You just got to really feel it out. And if it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. I would tell you, trust your gut. So now I'm going to give you a couple of do's and don'ts, a couple of tips and tricks. You can't rush the process. This takes time. This is not a 2-hour write a 5-page paper. This is start a week, 2, 3, 4 in advance and let it percolate. Write notes when you get a spare moment. When you're driving somewhere, think about it. When you're doing the laundry, when you're cutting the grass, when you're eating breakfast by yourself, don't read the cereal box. Think through this. It just takes time. Good communication, good writing, good presentation takes time. Second, don't assume that your first draft is gold. If I had a nickel for every student that said, yeah, I can see where you had some problems with this, but it was really just my first draft. A first draft is exactly that. A first draft is rough. It's not much better than the bullets I showed you on that scribbled sheet of paper. You've got to go from first draft to second draft to third draft, maybe even fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. On this book project, that is actually the 8th introduction I've written because I still haven't gotten it right. And that introductory chapter is about 2,800 words right now. I've written it 7 previous ways. Yes, 7. So think of how many words. This has been going on since early January. And I'm sorry, last January a year ago. So it takes time. It's got you just got to give it time, and you got to just keep working at it. And then don't edit too soon. When I write my first draft and my second draft, I don't worry about grammar. I don't worry about spelling, punctuation, that bulleted list. I don't care if the words are scribbled and you can't read them. I really don't care. I'm just trying to get ideas out before I move from ideas to the more formal thing. And then a couple of 3 do's. I had 3 don'ts, so 3 do's. Consider what might seem like it's ideas. That doesn't make sense. Consider what might seem like it's ideas. I know what I meant, but that's not what I said there. I'm sorry about that. Consider any idea as a possibility. So the craziest idea in the world. I actually told my wife I was going to use the photo of the triplets and a photo of my niece and a photo of my other niece, and she thought I was absolutely crazy. I think it actually worked pretty well. And then the second thing, really see your audience. And notice I put C in all capital letters. I can see you guys. Even though I can't see you, I have a sense of you. And as we're going through this, I'm learning more about you. And that's great. So if I do another one of these in a month or 2 or 6, I think you'll see that I'm even better at connecting with you because I have a better feel for you. And then test your work. The 8 versions of that chapter, the introduction to my book, I have tested that on a lot of different people. And that's really key. Run it by someone who's in your audience and see. Show it to someone and say, hey, does this, am I entertaining you? Is this interesting? Did you learn something from it? And if they say no, fix it. Don't get frustrated. Don't say, well, you don't realize. If you ask them the question and they give you honest feedback, take it for what it is. So those are my 3 do's and 3 don'ts. And then a couple things. If you have questions, I've got a couple questions to answer already, and I'm going to answer them. If you have more questions, please put them in the chat box. And also, I gave you my contact information. If you have a question for me, or if I said I was going to give you an answer to a question, please make sure that you send me an email, and I will get back to you as quickly as possible. Someone is saying that they missed half the presentation while they were installing Zoom. Is there a way to view this in its entirety? And then they say, great information. Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. They will be making this available to everyone, is my understanding. So hopefully there'll be other people that you'll see it coming down the pike in the next little while. They'll probably be telling you about that. I would think it'll take them a couple days, and then you'll see it's available somewhere. I do not know where. Question I had from someone else is my biggest dilemma is what to cite and what not to. I read for the knowledge and write in my own words. That way it becomes difficult to cite references. How do I overcome this? Is there a rule for citations of references both for academia and professional writing? Okay. Oh, and I'm getting information that this presentation will be posted on the JHU EP website. That makes sense. I probably could have thought of that if I had been thinking. Um, so to get back to that question, rule for citing. When in doubt, cite. I've never seen anyone ever get in trouble for citing too much. I've seen plenty of people get in trouble for citing too little, but when in doubt, cite. And what I would say is, in terms of citations, think about it from the perspective of the writer. And I've had the privilege of being a writer who's been cited. And I've had the privilege of being the writer who has had people steal my words. So I've been on both ends of this. What I would tell you is, think of it as a writer. If you write a really great sentence, a really great idea, you want to make sure that someone gives you credit for that going forward. So if you were to tell someone that great writing is sticky, and you take credit for that, that's not really intellectually fair, because that was my presentation, that was my idea. So you can say, I was on this presentation, and this writer was talking about, great writing, and he said it really has to be sticky. And I think that's really, we want to give credit where credit's due. And I can tell you, as someone who's doing research right now, I want to make sure that I get credit for my hard work, because I work really hard on my research. And if if this book gets published and someone takes parts of it and doesn't give me credit, that's not really fair. So I would say, give credit more often than not. And when in doubt, cite. 99.9% of the time, you're going to be fine in that case. In the professional climate, I think the rules of citation are a little looser. Although I would tell you, I wish that in the professional environment there was more citation. I've had some issues with writing this book. There have been some newspaper articles I've been trying to use, and they cite studies, and they don't give a full citation. So it's really hard to find the information, to chase down the information. I've actually had to call college professors whose name was in a quote and say, could you please send me a copy of your research? I'd love to see it. And I've got to track them down. I don't know what university they're at. And so citing that in the professional climate would be really more helpful. Another question I have, procrastination. Thank you for reminding me. I put that off. So the way to overcome procrastination, I think, is I do it by doing these bulleted lists. I start a bulleted list on a project as early as I can. For the book project, I have a bulleted list that's about, 60 pages right now. It's really long. That's my way. I try to make sure that I'm not getting up to the wall. I've written on deadline. I used to work for newspapers, and stories would break at the last minute, and we'd have to write them. Mr. C, you're welcome. I appreciate the positive feedback. Thank you very much. And I hated writing on deadline. Almost every mistake I made was on deadline. And so I've learned that I need time to be good at what I do. Good writing takes time. And the earlier you start, the earlier you can get it done. I'm a firm believer in getting a project done a couple of days in advance before the deadline, printing it out, leaving it aside for a day or two, and then coming back and looking at it one last time. And that's another hint I will give you. Print it out and look at it on a sheet of paper. I don't know what it is about the computer screen. You saw the mistake I had in my tips. I never printed this out and looked at it, and I probably should have, because I think that's where I made the mistake. If I printed it out and read it slide by slide, I would have caught that mistake. So I'm a firm believer in taking time. I know it eats up trees and printer cartridges, but it's worth it, even a long paper. So these 8 versions of this introduction to the book, I've printed them out, and I've read through them, and I've looked at them, and I've marked them up. And that's really key. And then someone's asking about writing for a blog on developing thought leadership. I'm not quite sure what you're trying to ask me. If you could give me some more clarification, I'm happy to try to answer that. And then someone's asking the question, what makes a great technical writer? Wow, I think a great technical writer is someone who understands the technology, not the way the technology, not the way the creators, the engineers, the coders, the software engineers, all those folks understand it, but understands it and appreciates it from the perspective of the audience. So let me give you an example. I had a job, this is about 10, 12 years ago, where I worked in a marketing department for a homeschool curriculum company here in Baltimore, and they were doing some online courses, and they needed a user's manual for their online courses, and I volunteered to do it. And the technology people tried to explain to me everything, how it worked and all this. They went through it. Oh, this is what it does, and here's the back room, this, that. Great. I listened, and then I sort of threw that away, and I said to them, could you give me user access? Like, why? You know, don't you want to see? No, I want user access. So I went through as a user, and I wrote the manual based on being a user. And in the process of being the user, I identified about 30 mistakes that they had, 30 things that they couldn't explain. I basically went in and tested their software in real time. And as I was using it as a user, I was taking screenshots, and then I was writing based on my experience. So I got away from taking the words and ideas of the technology people who had created it, and I got in the heads of the audience. And so that really feeds into what we're talking about today. If you can be in the audience, I think that's what makes you great. If someone were to ever tell me, you know, if someone says, someone said this was a really good presentation, that was their comment, they had to leave. And that to me means I really connected with my audience. I really understood my audience. I really delivered useful information to my audience. That's what that means to me. That doesn't mean I'm a great presenter. That means I really understood what I was trying to do, and I understood what you all needed. Okay, I've got clarity on the question. Do you have any tips for writing for a blog, for a business, or as an individual developing expertise? The goal for the business would be content marketing. The goal for a technical professional would be establishing thought leadership, in other words, personal branding and marketing. Okay, now I understand. So we live in a great place right now. Excuse me for a second while I take a sip of water. You can really create something in a blog that can lead you to be a thought leader, but I'm going to sort of turn things around a little bit on you. And I'm going to give you some marketing advice that I give my clients. If you create a blog, you have to find an audience. If you write something that's useful to people and post it in LinkedIn Pulse, which is LinkedIn's community for people to write blog content, you will actually get more opportunity to be a thought leader. So if that's your goal, I would recommend using LinkedIn Pulse. And if you want me to send you some information about how to use LinkedIn Pulse, just shoot me an email and we can talk about that. But LinkedIn gives you access to millions of leaders in business, people in business. And if you spend any time at all on LinkedIn, you will see that LinkedIn's really good about putting content in front of you that can be really useful. And so if you want to be a thought leader, LinkedIn's going to help you get in front of the people who are thinking about what you're writing about if you write about it well. So hopefully that gives you a good answer. I got a comment from someone saying cool beans. I know that's high praise. I can't wait to tell my wife someone said cool beans. Makes me hungry. Someone else said that I earned and maintained their attention, which is a great skill, which is really high praise. Again, that means I understood my audience this afternoon or this evening, and I was able to deliver you something that was useful. Any other questions before we wrap this up? If you have a question, throw it in the chat box. I think I've answered all the questions we had. I'll give you another couple seconds to throw them in. Do you think LinkedIn Pulse is better than Medium? Thank you, Ed. You're welcome. Glad it was useful. I think LinkedIn Pulse, because of the way LinkedIn puts content in front of people, and it's largely business people, it's quicker and easier to be a thought leader than Medium. I haven't used Medium myself. I've read stuff on Medium. I think it's much more user-defined in terms of how you get content than LinkedIn. LinkedIn scours your profile, and then based on what your profile is, they will send you content that's related to your interests. So I have a marketing company. My LinkedIn Pulse gives me a lot of marketing content. It also gives me some teaching content because it also knows that I'm a teacher. It does not give me content about leadership. It doesn't give me content about oil refineries. And so that's LinkedIn's algorithm providing me the information, which is different than Medium, which is much more user generated, if that makes sense, in terms of what you see. Any other questions? Uh, oh, they say it takes about 10,000 hours to become a master in anything. Yes, that is Malcolm Gladwell, The Outliers. And he did the research on Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, on the Beatles, and on some others, and found it takes about 10,000 hours doing something to be really good at it. If you think about it in the work perspective, that would be about 5 years, because you figure 50 hours a week or 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, 10,000 comes in about 5 years. And I would tell you, in terms of my career, it really takes about 5 years to get good at something. Person's asking me about doing writing drills. I am not a firm believer in writing drills. I am actually much more of a believer in writing. And what I would say is figure out what you want to do in a writing career and start doing it. Do it on a blog, do it on LinkedIn, volunteer for someone. If you want to do technical writing, find a nonprofit organization and see if you can help them with some technical writing task. Maybe I'm trying to think. I deal with an organization that has a online donation process that they just added, and their manual is horrible. And someone could create that manual for them as a volunteer project or an internship if possible, and that would get you in the world and start building your portfolio, because ultimately what people want to see is that you can actually do these things. And so doing it for an organization, doing it for a church, doing it for a synagogue, doing it for a nonprofit, doing it for a community association, for a politician who needs something written technical, even going to a company in your community and saying, hey, do you have any technical writing that I could do just to help you over the summer? And then you ask about seeking writing opportunities. Mark says awesome sauce, and he tells me I can borrow that one. All right, I like it. In terms of writing opportunities, what I would say is, if you want to be involved in writing, get out there and start writing. When I was hiring people for a newspaper and several other writing jobs over the course of my career, the number one thing that I needed someone to do is prove to me that they were writing. So I had folks that wrote for their college newspaper. That was great. I had folks that showed me their master's thesis and showed me the drafts of that so I could see their writing process. I had someone who volunteered for a community, a nonprofit in their community, and they volunteered by writing press releases, and they showed me those. I had another person who was really good at doing web content, and they wrote web content for several of their friends as birthday and Christmas gifts. They actually did a website for their father's company, and that website was brilliantly done. I loved the content, and that's what led me to think that person was someone to hire. Mr. C says, please hire me. I can send my resume in various reports. Oh, wow. He says, I'll work for free until you find competent for pay. Or find me competent for pay. Okay, well, and that's how you do it. I mean, that really. And I may send me your resume if you're interested. I may have some connections for writing work. I may have some opportunities as we go forward. So yeah, and I would tell you the other thing is start talking to people. One of the really important skills I've learned in my life is if you put it out there and tell people it's what you want to do, and you give them the real information why you want to do something, you'll be amazed how the world opens up to you. So for instance, Mr. C says he's going to send me his resume tonight. I'll take a look at it. I might be able to use it. I may have some other people that might be able to use it. So here's someone who's using a really valuable opportunity. He's not just taking the information I got, but he's seeing opportunity come out of it. So I would encourage you beyond the writing process. Part of knowing your audience is also knowing your audience in terms of your career and how to get in front of those people and how to have a message that appeals to them. So with that, I'm going to close things up. I want to thank everyone for your time, your interest, your great questions and comments. I'm going to head home and go play the guitar and figure out a Drake song to play. Thanks. Good luck.